Hi everyone, thanks for joining us here at Creating Conversation. What you're about to hear, just to give you a peek behind the scenes, it was actually one of the very first talks that we recorded live. This is actually technically the first Creator in Conversation. We hosted Michael Carroll. Michael is a really prolific, excellent writer. He's perhaps best known for his work with Judge Dredd 2000 AD, but has also a great career of his own, original prose stories as well. Michael was really generous with his time to come in and to speak with both visitors and the students at Task Art. I really appreciate Michael taking the time out of his schedule to do so, and also he's just an absolute pro. We gave him the mic and he just delivered the goods, as you're about to hear. So it's really interesting in this episode to discover not just Michael's approach to telling a story, but also a little bit about process and how his process as a writer has developed by observing the processes of some of his collaborators. For example, he delivers a really interesting insight with working with John Higgins and how John's approach to pinning up a script informed his approach to being a writer as well. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and over to Michael Carroll.
Hi everyone, thanks very much for joining us today. For those who don't know me, my name's Owen Cardy. I'm president of the Tallaght County's Financial Art Task Art. We opened our doors just in February, and since then we've been holding a series of masterclasses, which are standalone workshops. We began that in May, and first one was with Todd Stashik. The second one was with Mark Russell, and the third one was with Andrea Romano. We have more on the cards as well. But to help spread word about the Academy, we're also going to be hosting this new series of events that we're calling Creator in Conversation. So we're going to invite a different guest speaker each month to come in and talk a little bit about their career and such. Michael is very kind in supporting the Academy. As soon as you hear about it, you reach out, which is great. You can help them spread the word. Really appreciate that, and appreciate if everyone else as well could let folks know about us, because we're still at that new startup stage. And I've waffled on enough, so I'm going to introduce you now to the guy you all here to listen to, Michael Carroll. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Right. Pretty much everybody here knows me anyway. And some of you will know me for 30 years or more. But yeah, so Philip has known me the longest. We've known each other since about 1988, I think. Now, younger people, 1988 was a year way back in the end of the 1900s, which makes us sound Victorian almost. But anyway, yeah, so I'm Mike Carroll. I'm a full-time writer. I've been writing full-time since 1999 when the company I was working for decided that they didn't want to give us any more work and that we could all go home, which was nice. So I'm half expecting any day to get a call saying, where are you? But yeah, so 25 and a bit years, quarter of a century, I've been pretending that I know what I'm doing as a writer. Prior to that, I had written an awful lot of stuff, which quite a few books. But when you're writing for a hobby, it's fun. When you're writing for a job, it's work. And it is work. You have to do the work. The most important thing as a creator, whether you're a writer or an artist or a builder or you cannot call yourself a writer if you don't do the writing. You can't call yourself an artist if you don't draw. When Philip and I were in the Irish Science Fiction Association many years ago, there was a spin-off called the Writer and Artist Workshop, and we would meet once a month, and we would go chat and we'd talk about the books we were doing and the stuff we were working on, the comics that we were going to do. And some of us made it as writers and artists, and some, one or two people I think in particular, are still talking about the book that they're going to write, the same book that they were going to write 30, nearly 40 years ago. It won't exist if you don't make it. You have to do it. There's no shortcuts. You have to get up, apply seat of pants to seat of chair. You have to apply fingers tips to keyboard and actually do it. And it's hard sometimes when you're writing, especially if it's a novel. It can be really hard because you're looking at this vast map that's not been filled in. Your job is to be sitting in one corner, just fill in the map. The nice thing about that is that, you can make up what's in there. It just has to make sense to the person who comes along trying to read the map later on. But it is quite daunting to go, this is huge. It's how do I take this on? And of course, you take it on like you do everything else. You do it, one keystroke at a time. Obviously, a bit faster than that. You need to vomit it all out onto the keyboard and then tidy it up afterwards. When it comes to writing comics, there's a different discipline, which is quite interesting, I think, because when you're writing comics, you're writing to a tiny audience, which is the artists, the letterists, letterer, inkers, colours, all the people inside the industry. You're writing to them. They're telling the story to the rest of the world. So your job as a writer of comics would be to say, this is what I want the story to look like. And they will go, right, gotcha. I will interpret that, make it into something that the people can understand. So you don't have to be too flowery with your language. You don't have to have perfect semicolons or even quarter colons, which I just invented. You don't have to do any of this stuff. You don't have to know that. You have to be clear, precise, to get what's in your head onto the page in a way that the artist will look at it and get it into their head and then put it onto the paper, and then the readers will come along and read it. So we're kind of going through an interpreter the whole time. Not kind of, we are going through an interpreter the whole time. So it gives us a very different discipline. If you're writing prose, prose is like long distance telepathy over time. The words, I think, end up in the reader's head directly. Much less so with writing comics. But then again, of course, the great advantage with that is that if we make a mistake as a writer, the artist will go, that bit doesn't work. And they just, they will tell you sometimes, or the editor will say, no, that's just good. Or sometimes if you're working with someone like John Higgins, who shall remain nameless, he just draws what he wants anyway. And then you've got to come after it and go, how do I make this go? In which book? In my show and tell, I think it's this one. We have a wee story, myself and John. Yes, and Razor Jack. John Higgins, brilliant artist. I wrote this 8-page strip, and John had a great time drawing it. And they're his characters. So, he decided he'd like the ending, change it. And it took me longer to rewrite the script to fit his new ending to make it make sense than it did to write it in the first place. But it's a rare occasion. The purpose of what we do is to entertain. Educate maybe, but entertain primarily. We have to get what's in our heads into the reader's head by making words happen on paper or on a keyboard. And some people, writers, will tell you, like Stephen King will say that he doesn't know what he's going to find when he starts writing. It's like archaeology. He knows there's something there, but he has to dig away, clean all the dirt away and find the thing. And that's his story. And that works for some writers. I tried that once with a novel and it was a mess. It didn't work. In my mind, I prefer to think of it as sculpture. Block of marble is your blank page, and we are Michelangelo. In my case, Michelangelo. And you take away the bits that are meant to be there, and you end up with sculpture, so you know what you're going for before you start. And writing comics, I think, now some people might disagree, I think it's very important to know what the end game is. You cannot just kind of wing it and then say, oh yeah, no, I meant to do that. We're not cats. There'll be the bit where the cat falls off the mantelpiece and then walks away just to go, that's your job, well done. I think, no, you didn't mean to do that. That was an accident. With writing comics, because it's a different discipline to writing novels, I don't think we can afford to meander our way to some place and go, yeah, this is where I was meant to be. If I'm driving from here to Cork, I know where I am. I know where Cork is. I know the landmarks I have to hit along the way. So I will drive to Cork. I mean, there might be, when I accidentally turn down the cul-de-sac, or, realize I'm going totally the wrong direction or stop off somewhere that I didn't realize was there. That will happen when you're writing a story. If you don't know where the story is going, it's like getting your car, driving around for hours until you find something interesting and saying, this is where I'm meant to be. With comics, if we do that, we have to remember we've got passengers who want to get to some place, passengers being the other creators. We have to know what the story is so that they can draw it. If I am writing a 6-page Judge Dredd script, I need to know that it'll always start in 2008 in the comic. It'll always start on the right-hand page. Flip it over, 2 pages, flip it over, 2 pages, flip it over again, 1 last page. So I need to know that I've got 6 pages for 2000 AD to get to the end of the destination. If I am just wandering, I might find myself halfway down page 5 and going, I have no clue where I am. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's happening. How do I end this? So then what you've got to do is you figure out an ending and you've got to go, well, I can't squeeze this all into a page and a half. It needs more story than this. So then you find yourself cutting out panels and cutting out pages. You're doing more work in the long run. With a novel, that's not too bad because you call that the flavour of the book. Sometimes you do a lot less revisionist editing. And all editing is revisionist. Ignore I said that. With a comic, you really have to be disciplined. You've got X number of panels per page. You can't have too many. You can't have 12 panel pages anymore. This is not the 1950s. The artist has to have room to express themselves. So yeah, know what the ending of your story is first. You don't have to know the exact route. You just know that you're going to Cork. Metaphorically, bear that in mind, not everybody has to write a story about going to Cork. This is an analogy. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know when you're finished? Is basically the problem there. This is also true of novels and short stories, but again, with a novel and a short story, you generally are going to be the sole creator, so you allow yourself that room to do a bit of meandering sightseeing along the way. You don't have that discipline in the comic. Another thing as well, the discipline of writing comics is that if you're writing a movie, generally you have some flexibility with the amount of time it takes. It's a page a minute. They're still going by that rule these days. If you're writing a novel, a short story, you can go where you want to go. You can do it at your pace. American comics is 20 or 22 pages. Your story has to be done in that time. And it's not, you can't finish here and just have the character sitting around going, your story ends 22 pages, or 6 pages if it's just Red 3000 AD, 5 pages if it's something else from 2000 AD like Proteus Vex or Silver or one of the other ones that I do. So you cannot have an extra page unless you're very, very lucky. You can't go to the editor and say, I can't finish my story in time, please can I have an extra page, which is the writer's equivalent of saying, please can I stay up for 5 more minutes, I really like this commercial. You can't do that. So you have to know how to pace yourself. And I mentioned about the pages in a comic. If this was 2000 AD, it would be front cover, the editorial bits, first page of Judge Dredd. So what you want is at the bottom of your first page, you have to go, well, it has to be something there that makes the reader go, ooh, so they know what's coming next. And the bottom of page 3, same again. Bottom of page 5, ooh, something else. And then you wrap up your story. Or in Judge Dredd magazine, which is the monthly version of 2000 AD, we have 10 pages to play with, which is really weird. It's like getting extra pocket money. So the writing of a comic is quite disciplined. With a movie, you can have a 90-minute movie or a 120-minute movie, or God forbid you can go Martin Scorsese and have a 180-minute movie that's like 3 hours. You can do this, but in comics, you generally, if you're working for a standard publisher, you have a discipline and you have to stick to it. And if you're writing a weekly or a monthly thing, you have to deliver on time. You can't go, the muse is not speaking to me today. I shall go to that park and feed the ducks to the alligators. You can't do that. It's a job. Remember Octocon last year? We had the Irish National Science Fiction Convention last year, we had a panel talking about writing, and someone mentioned about deadlines, and the other panelists were going, "Oh, I'm so bad at deadlines." I know they're all going about how, "Oh, I missed this deadline," and I'd say to them, "Oh, please," and they have to pretend that you're working, and I'm going, "No, deliver on time. In fact, deliver early. Deliver a week early. If I've got something to deliver by, say, the end of the year, if it's the 31st of December is my deadline, I will deliver a week early. That's Christmas Day. That'll prove my dedication. But I'll deliver early. Not too early. If you deliver too early, then they have time to make you make changes. If you deliver just on time, they know they can rely on you, and they will ring you up out of the blue at 10 o'clock at night saying, "Oh my God, panic, panic, panic. Can you get something to me by tomorrow morning?" And you go, "Yes." If you're the sort of person who's always going to be late, you're never going to get that phone call that says, "Help." You're never going to get the phone call that says, "We have a deadline. I know just the person who can get this done in on time." It is a job, and it's, you have to treat it like a job. It's an art form, of course. Creating anything is an art form. But you put like an effort in. It is not that you can sit there with your laudanum in your French cafe waiting for divine inspiration. It is work. It doesn't mean it's not fun. It's not fun. But no, it is. But you have to do it. It won't do itself. If you're writing a novel, it only exists inside your head until you put it onto the page. And that comes to something that I'm not sure a lot of writers or creators necessarily, but writers in particular would agree with this, but I think it's important. If you've got a particular story that you want to tell, whether it's a play or even if it's a song, a message that you want to get out into the world. One of the worst things you can do, I think, and I found in my experience, is to tell people about it before you write it. I know I will tell you only what's coming up in my stories to a degree. I'll say, "Oh, I got this scene, that's a bit awkward." And by the time I'm halfway through telling her what the problem is, I'll have worked it out in my head. That's fine. But sitting down with your mates saying, "It's a great idea. Science fiction story. Aliens come from the sun or whatever." And you tell them the story. There's a little switch in your head that goes, click, told that story now. So when you come to try and write it, that switch is still active and you're going, Facebook. Oh, no, Twitter. The impetus is gone. You've told that story. It's out of your system now. And that's a danger. I've seen this happen with artists in a similar way, where they have an idea of something they want to draw and they do a preliminary sketch and they get it nice and detailed. And then they go, "I'll move on to the next thing." And so they've only got a sketch, they haven't got the actual finished work done. That can happen with writing as well, where you've created your synopsis, your outline, and a little switch says, "Yeah, that's done now." That part of me that says I must complete this work has been ticked off. You've got to fight that. But definitely if you start telling your friends or chatting to someone or your workshop even, and you tell your story in too much detail, you give away all the cool bits, those little switches go off in your head going, "That's done. I don't need to do that." And when it comes to write, you can't write. Partly that's one of the causes of writer's block. Writer's block happens to everybody. And another cause of writer's block is not believing that you can do it. And then thinking that you're great is another one. You've got to put your own ego aside and go, "It's work, I will do it. Tell a story. If you can't figure out how to get big long story in particular, if you know this bit, you've got that bit worked out, you've written that bit, you know where it ends, but you don't know this bit in the middle. That's because A, you didn't follow your plan and you wandered off down some feckin' side road and you ended up in Galway instead of Cork. Nothing wrong with Galway. We love Galway, but we weren't supposed to be going there. So watch out for that. And also it happens because you didn't plan. You didn't stick to your plan, or you've had a better idea. Better ideas are to stick to the bicycle spokes of writing. It's bugger. Sounds great, because you sit there going, oh, yeah. And you write little notes with this, and then you want to write that bit. And once it's directly connected to what you're currently doing, you've got to be able to put it aside, wrap it up in lavender paper, tuck it away in a little corner of your heart, and then do the proper thing. But if your idea relates to what you're writing, sometimes you have to go, ooh, back. How do you make that bit fit? And then you have to fit that in. That happens less if you plan your story ahead. If you're making up as you go along, doesn't happen quite so much. And the best way to defeat writer's block is, I found, to write little notes to yourself about why you're stuck and what's happening with the story. I mean, I talk to myself in my development notes. We could do this and we could do that. We could go there. And what if we did this? What if we did that? And it eventually will turn into a plot. And if I get stuck, I will go back to this document and I'll start writing notes. Just keep going. And you kind of talk yourself out of being stuck. Sometimes, not always. Sometimes you're stuck because it just doesn't work. And sometimes you cannot bridge the gap. You've got the first bit gone, you know where you're going great, and your characters are all gung-ho, and they're really looking forward to getting to Cork. And then there's a gap, and maybe there's an earthquake, and you cannot get across the road. You cannot figure, how do we get from there to there? And there's a brilliant thing you can do in writing, which is called pretending you got that bit done. And you jump ahead, okay? And this genuinely works a good 50% of the time. You pretend you've got that bit done. You start your characters where the next solid bit is. So if they're like on a quest and they need to get the Isle of Argon or something like that, and you can't figure out how to get out of the jungle, you go, right, let's pretend we figured out how to get out of the jungle. They are now out of the jungle right from there. And as that goes, eventually you'll go, I don't know how they can get out now. Oh, if they did this, if they did that. Or sometimes you realise, oh wait, they didn't need to be in the jungle. And the whole bit doesn't need to be there. And that can happen. But again, if you plan your story, if you know where you're going, again, you don't have to know every single pothole on the way from here to Cork, but you do need to know which direction you're going in. You need to know what Cork looks like, so when you get there, you can go, hooray, we have arrived. And then as a reward, you get to type the end. With a comic, same kind of thing. You get to your last page and you write the bit that's so powerful. You're actually crying as you're writing it. And I've been there far too many times. Sometimes you're crying because it's over. But other times you're crying because this is gold. I have realtered the universe because this is so good. So yeah, you have to my mind, with a comic in particular, you have to plan. One of the other reasons you have to plan is that if you are making it up as you go along, you get to the end and go, oh, hang on a minute, no, that character should have had 4 arms instead of 3. And then you've got to go back to the whole thing to make sure that they've got 4 arms instead of 3. Because otherwise, when the artist starts drawing it, they'll draw them with 3 arms. And then they get to the end and suddenly he's holding 4 things and 3 arms. They're going, this is madness. You have to have a good visual idea of what the story will look like so that you turn that into words and the artist turns it back into pictures. They will never turn it back into pictures the way you thought they were going to, but at least it gives them somewhere to start. Sometimes with Judge Dredd stuff, we all know what Judge Dredd looks like. We know what most of the characters look like. So it's very easy to do things like, oh yeah, this other judge comes up and it'll be Judge Kevin rides up, blah, 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 blah. And we have default modes as people. This is a little bit of meander, but it's worth it. When you're writing a story, when someone's reading a story, and it opens with dialogue, sometimes stories open with dialogue, you don't know where they are. The reader, unconsciously or subconsciously, puts the characters in a void. Their voices in a void. They don't know who. So someone says, "Hey, how are you?" And the other person responds with, "Oh, not so good since the operation." And then someone else, maybe a third person, will chime in. If there's a third person, they'll be named. Then they'll be introduced, so the readers don't get confused. And once you name a character, the reader starts subconsciously building a picture of what they look like. Then you have a line in the text which might be something like, a chair scraped across the floor. They're in a place that has chairs and the floor. Sunlight dapples in through the windows. That was daytime. And it's sunny. And gradually they build up this picture from the tiny clues that you're giving them as to what's going on. This is when you're writing prose, obviously. It's quite a bit different when you're writing a script for a movie or for TV or comics. So you write prose, and the reader will not be aware that at first they didn't know who the characters were or what they looked like. They just had voices. Eventually you go, something blah, 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 Jeremy said. And so, well, Jeremy, that's a man. Probably. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they look like. And the reader will have defaults. If you don't say that Jeremy is 7 years old and he's an Asian kid, the reader will assume that they're a 30-year-old Caucasian man. It's automatic. In our culture, obviously. It's just something we do. When you're writing Judge Dredd, all the judges, if you referenced, Judge Smith, the artist will automatically draw him as a middle-aged white man. You have to say Judge Smith brackets Caucasian, African American, Asian, whatever description you want, comma, female, comma, 53 years old, has a beard. Well, probably not. Well, might have a beard. But you have to challenge their defaults with a comic. You have to describe what you want the artist to draw, because otherwise they will automatically go to their defaults, and it's no criticism to the artist. It's just something people do. When we're reading something, if we don't know what the characters look like, we have default modes. Listen to a play on the radio. It's just two people talking, and the occasional sound effect of the clinking of the glasses behind the bar. We make huge assumptions of what the characters look like based on their voice alone. And then one of them will say, here comes Barbara. And then we know the next person speaks Barbara, and it's a woman. Usually you can tell by the timbre of the voice, but not always. So your descriptions as a writer for movies or TV or comics, particularly comics, you have to describe what you want to see. You have to say interior, daytime, the cafe, who's present, what they're doing, and so on. It's a discipline that you get used to very quickly. But if you don't do it, I read a script recently, by recently I mean yesterday, from it who said, "Can you have a look at my script?" And I went, yes. And I read the script, and it was a great story, quite well told, actually quite efficiently told as well. People usually ramble, and it didn't go too far. But I have no clue what the characters look like. Not the faintest. And then one character is described as being similar to someone else, and I'm going, that doesn't really help me. They're all just ciphers. They're just names. So it feels a little bit mechanical sometimes when you're writing a script where you have to describe, the position of the sun. You have to, not necessarily always, but sometimes it might be important to describe what time of day it is, because the enemy fighters are flying in from the east. And if it's sunrise and they're flying from the east, well, people who are fighting, the sun will be in their eyes. They'll only see silhouettes. Not going to happen an awful lot. It doesn't happen in, say, Mickey Mouse comics quite so often. But the writer has to think of this. Has to think of it. And again, when you come up with something in your head, the artist will generate something totally different based on your words. And sometimes you look at it and go, that is so not what I wanted. And whose fault that is? That's the writer's fault. I had a Judge Dredd story which I thought was way dark. It's very dark. I'll tell you what happens in it. Go on. Okay, I will. This is a story. It opens with someone on the street being arrested by a young judge, and she handcuffs him to a holding post. And what happens is, in Judge Dredd stories, it's future science fiction. So we all know who Judge Dredd is, don't we? Yeah, okay, cool. So, hands to a holding post that he'll be picked up later on to be taken off to prison. And as she's locking him up, she gets an emergency call. There's some big disaster going on. She speeds away on her bike. It's some heist or something happening. Speeds away on her motorbike, and is promptly killed. So he's there going, who? So a day passes, because she has no time to call it in, you see. And he's going, help. And people are going, oh God, no. And they will not have anything to do with him. And we next see him sitting down on the ground with his next to the pole, his hands up, handcuffed to the thing. Please, someone help me. It's raining. It's nighttime. He's freezing. There's a stream of urine drifting away from him because he can't hold it any longer. He's freaking out. No one has come. 2 days pass. He's begging. He sees someone he knows. Please help me, Pat. I go, no, wait, man. No, wait, no. No, I mean, if I interfere, I mean, that's a prison sentence for me automatically, interfering with a cuffed prisoner. It's a terrifying situation. So I wrote this horror story of this guy absolutely losing his mind because he's surrounded by people all day long in the most populous city on the planet, and people are going, no, not my problem, I'm not doing anything. Nobody will call the judge to say there's someone trapped here because they don't want to get involved. They don't want the judges to go asking them questions saying, and why were you here? What are you after? What's your name? ID yourself. What's your purpose in this area? What have you been up to? Have you been drinking, sir? This kind of thing. So it's a terrifying story. And in the end, what happens is Judge Dredd comes along and spots him and sorts it all out. And the guy's absolutely seriously punches Judge Dredd out of him, just reflex. And now he's on another charge. Anyway, the upshot of it all is that the artist drew it all kind of silly and cartoony, and it's all kind of jovial. You drew it as I wrote it as a very dark story. It's this guy's life is just ebbing away, and he's terrified. No one will help him, and it's the way it was drawn. It's almost cute. Now, no disrespect to the artist because he's a brilliant artist. Yeah. But he didn't get from the script that this was a horror story and not a sort of a farce of the poor guy can't even get arrested. To my mind, it was one of the darkest things I've ever written, and it comes across as this jovial little funny throwaway tale. Whose fault was that? It's mine. I should have made it clear in the script. No, this is dark. Or, well, maybe the editor should have. But either way, you can't blame the artist. He reads this and goes, yep, he saw something there that wasn't in the script, and that will happen. So we have to head that off at the pass as much as possible by just saying, no, this is what I want. And sometimes we will be wrong. Sometimes we will go, this is what it should be, and because I've got it worked out in my head, I know the angles, I know what it should look like, this page is going to be brilliant, and the artist will go, no. I had a great one years ago with Paul J. Holden, who's a comic artist from the north. But, we don't hold that against him all that much. Lovely fella, great artist. He and I were working on a Judge Dredd strip where I had it's an action sequence, and in my mind, this is going to look great. We'll have it like it's security camera up in the corner of this room seeing this fight going on. So every panel is from the same angle. And that way people are coming into the scene and it'll be great. It's 8 panels on a page. It's quite grand. And I had it described very clearly. And when he got the script, Paul got in touch with me and said, no, don't want to do that. I said, but no, it'll look great. He says, no, it'll be boring. I said, it'd be boring to draw because I've got to draw the same background for every page and I just draw the change, or every panel, just changing the characters. And it won't look exciting to the reader. The reader doesn't want to see this clever security camera view of what's on screen and what's not and what's happening just off the edge. They want to see someone getting kicked or punched or whatever. It's an action story, an action scene. And when he delivered the work, it was glorious. It was fantastic. Obviously I didn't tell him. You never tell them they're good. But it was a lesson I learned quite quickly, is that if the artist has a different way of doing it, they're nearly always going to be right. And by nearly always, I mean, we're talking 95% of the time they will be right. If it's an experienced artist. If it's an inexperienced artist, 95% of the time they won't be right. But they get there very, very, very quickly. The artists know how panels should look, how a story should flow. The writer needs to know enough to give the artist the right timbre, the right atmosphere for a story. You need to know things like not to put too many characters speaking on the one page, because then the letterer can't get all the balloons to point at the right people at the right time. You need to know how dialogue can transition from one scene to another. Sometimes you see the movie where people are talking, and then it cuts to the next scene, and you can still hear one of the people, their voiceover. I do that all the time in my stuff. Proteus Vex is a series that just ended in 2008, a few weeks ago, and a couple months ago now. And I did that all the time. The narrative allowed the stories to jump from one scene to another to flow, and it's a tricky thing to learn, but very, very useful trick that you can pick up from movies. But it's only by watching movies and reading comics and all that you learn how to do all this. We've gone past the stage where the characters tell you what's happening, where the narrative tells you what's happening. Pictures should tell you what's happening, and the dialogue should be a different level of story. And that's where comics is a discipline that nothing else comes close. Movies and TV are almost parallel. The difference is that in a movie, everything happens at a particular pace, and you go along with that pace. When someone's reading a thing, whether it's a book or a comic, they read at their own pace, and they can go back. I mean, not just rewind all the time. They can practice, and I go, where the hell does he get from there to? So the art will show the readers what's going on, and the dialogue and the captions will inform a different layer of the story. It's hard to think of a good example of this without boasting. Oh, go on then, I will. Just real quick. In Razor Jack, real quick, side. Razor Jack is a graphic novel written and drawn by John Higgins, brilliant artist. And when he was this collected version, this one here was coming out. It's just the title one, yes. This was coming out. John wasn't happy with some of the writing, particularly the dialogue, so he asked me to rewrite everything for him. So I rewrote the whole thing. And then I come up with some other ideas. And this is a story called A Glimpse of Summer that I wrote. And this is the one I mentioned earlier where John changed the ending on me. But in this case, we have a story set in ancient feudal Japanese times. With red captions, or black captions with red writing, and yellow captions. There are two different stories, as it were, going on at the same time. One is the dialogue of the bad guys. One is the inner dialogue of the hero reflecting on what's happening. And then at the same time, the pictures show what's happening in the immediate time. So it's quite hard to do. But it's a case of your captions, your dialogue has to move everything forward. It's like in a movie, every line is important. It either moves the story forward, it reveals something about the characters, or it adjusts the atmosphere as necessary. Even when characters on a movie or a TV are joking and throwing away, like in the restaurant scene in Reservoir Dogs at the beginning, where they're arguing about whether or not you should tip the waiter, whether it's Mr. Pink doesn't want a tip. This reveals so much about all the characters very, 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 very quickly. It feels like a throwaway thing. They're just having a natter. It's kind of funny. He's being a bit thick about it. But we learn a huge amount very, very quickly about what's going on, what's happening with the characters. But what they're not talking about is the fact that they're about to pull a jewel heist off. Then it cuts then immediately afterwards to after the jewel heist. We don't see it happen. We don't need to see it happen because it's not about that. In comics, we do that sort of thing an awful lot because we have 5, 6, 7 panels per page, if we're lucky. 30 pages, not 30 pages, 20 pages, 22 pages maybe in a 30-page comic. You don't have a lot of space to tell your story. So each page has a number of panels, and each panel has a frozen scene. Even in the most action-packed comic, look at the car chase in this one. That's not a car chase. That's a drawing of a car. It's not even moving. What the hell? The reader does the motion in their head. I mean, obviously, most people will know this. I'm sure that when we write a comic, the action happens in the gutters, in the space between the panels. And Oscar Wilde said, we are all in the gutters, but some of us are looking at the cars. Pretty sure that's what he was saying. So the writer's job is to know which of these moments to describe to the artist, and this is the reader, and then the artist will draw them for the reader. It's our job to go, well, I know that this fight has to happen, and they've got to get, across the factory roof and into the helicopter. There's enough of the helicopters in my stories. You don't show every rung of the ladder that they're climbing. You don't show every step that they're running. You show them running towards the ladder. You show one of them up on the ladder, shooting back at the bad guys or the cops. I'm not prejudiced. You show someone in the chopper reaching out to help someone up, and then you see the bad guys on the ground shooting at the chopper as it flies away. And the readers will know what's happened. They won't see it as a series of static images. They'll see it as an action scene that flows. And it's our job to visualize it first as a writer, and then turn that into the choice slices, the good cuts, the best bits. And sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes you get a scene in a comic where, and we're coming back to this one again, where it does not flow. Now, when John Higgins drew Razorjack originally, as two, I won't be able to find the page if I look for it. You never find what you're looking for. He wrote as two separate issues. And my job was to clean up all the dialogue and the captions and give it a kind of a tighter flow. He didn't want to do any redrawing because, it was done. But he shot a character at the end of part 1, and in part 2, they're still alive. And it's very clearly, they should not be alive with most of their brains being in the other room. It's basically, it's kind of a little stumbling block there. So we had to get him to rewrite this. It was papering over the crack, and people who've read this as a whole work don't see that now. It flows. They won't be able to tell where it was. I mean, I told you, so you might be able to spot it. But John had to draw one panel to make it work, and that took me about a day to figure out how to get the two bits to join up. There's a famous thing years ago, a poster that we used to get remember we used to get posters in Golden Discs, and there was one of two guys or two engineers who obviously put down different sides of a railway line, and the railway lines join up except the left, they don't line up properly basically, and they go, oh shit. It is a bit like that sometimes, that you have to, and you have to make things work the hard way. When I was working on Jennifer Blood for Dynamite Comics, I took over the main series from Al Ewing, a brilliant writer. And Al knew his time was coming to an end. He was done with this story. He knew how he wanted to stop, but he knew, of course, he couldn't just end the whole series because it was popular. He knew I was taking over. So what did he do? He had the main character, who was a vigilante. They had her in prison and stabbed by an inmate and dying. Anyway, your turn. I'll sort that out. Yeah. And that was a lesson that I learned quite quickly, is that you can't trust Al Ewing because he's evil. No, the lesson I learned was, and this is hugely important, I think. He put me in a horrible position. I was like, how do I mean, I can't type in and then actually see she survived. I can't have it that they can't write that the shank missed the vital organs, because clearly she got, pretty badly stabbed as far as I remember. I mean, this is a long time ago now, but so I had to come up with a way to basically have her survive this, which I did. So she managed to survive. And it starts off with, my episode starts off with the prison overseers talking to the governor saying, okay, we have a bit of a problem. We had a prisoner shanked. Who was it? It was Jennifer Blood. And they're going, oh crap, right, what do we do with the body? No, that's the thing. See, after she's in the yard there, she's been stabbed, and then what happened? Then she got up, and they're all going, oh crap, because they know that she's a very dangerous character. Them talking about it gave me an avenue, a way in, a shortcut almost to my version of the story, my continuation. Jennifer Blood is stabbed in prison. She gets up, and all the people who stabbed her are going, oh, we're in trouble. Oh, we're in trouble. And it gives me, as a writer, the handhold I need to climb, the rungs, if you like, for this ladder. If you're starting on with a blank page, you can go anywhere. So sometimes you can go nowhere because you're going, with a story, or whether it's a novel or a movie, sometimes the artist, the editor, will give you limitations. If you're writing for Marvel, they'll say, okay, you're doing Iron Man, but we have to have Doctor Strange in this one. How? I don't know. Doctor Strange has to be in this one because that ties up with another thing. That is an absolute pain. But stumbling blocks can be stepping stones. If you, has anybody ever been a computer programmer here or anything like that? Nobody. We all know that there's a computer language called C, and it's very, 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 very flexible. You can do anything with it. Most of everything that we see is written in a language based on C, which is a great language. You can do anything with it. And because you can do anything with it, sometimes it's really, 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 really hard to do anything at all. Other languages like Pascal or Basic, they're quite limited. So because they're limited, you have fewer tools to play with. If you have fewer tools to play with, it's easier to get a handle on how to play with them. So when you're writing a story, if you have a completely blank page, completely open field, a map that's not been even nearly filled in, you don't know where to go. You don't know how to start. But if someone says, your story has to have this, it must have that, it can only be done in a certain number of pages, that is a limitation. And your limitations they can be anchors that you can anchor yourself to and actually start moving forward. Why would you anchor yourself and then move forward? They were analogies. You can nail yourself to an analogy and fling it over the rainbow. You have to give yourself difficulties. And that sounds strange, doesn't it? This goes back now to what I was saying about a writer's block. If you're totally stuck and you don't know how to get from A to B, you can. Or not from A to B. You start at A, you've got to B. You don't know how to get to D. You don't know what C is. You can say to yourself, you know what? There's going to be a dead elephant in this. How do we put that in? You can throw in something to force your brain to work towards solving a problem, and then you can take away the problem and then just keep going. With writing a story, especially about someone else's property, there will be limitations. Though, you cannot, like Judge Dredd never shows his face to the readers anyway. It's not like he doesn't ever take off his mask. He'll show up in a few of these. He doesn't ever take off his helmet. We just don't see it. So there's a tiny little stumbling block there, is that we can't have Dredd in the shower unless we show him from behind. And then we're not even allowed to do that because you're not allowed to see the back of his head, because by this stage, well, Judge Dredd ages in real time, but this age he's probably got grey hair. No one ever thinks of that, do they? No, you're only thinking about yourselves. It's disgraceful. So Superman cannot kill, well, not supposed to kill his enemies, his bad guys. That's a terrible limitation, but it forces the readers to come up, forces the creators to come up with a better solution than just killing them. Zack Snyder's not allowed in this room. If you have if you can see your limitations as being guidelines, that's another way of looking at it. So with a story of any kind, if you're stuck, give yourself restrictions. It's a challenge. Then, you don't learn anything if you do things the easy way. You never learn anything by having the path smoothed out for you. So someone recently online was talking about AI writing. Why should I write a script when you can do it for me? I go, yeah, can't get AI to do it for you. But if you can't go to a restaurant, order a meal, and then call yourself a chef. You cannot take a helicopter to top of Mount Kilimanjaro and call yourself a mountaineer. You're just a passenger. So the AI stuff can all go suck a big fat one as far as I'm concerned. It's all nonsense. You'll never get anything imaginative out of an AI. You'll just get derivative. And the more AI is out there, the more it feeds on itself, and it's all just this self-consuming nonsense. Human beings are hopefully forever, always going to be able to defeat the Terminator. Where was I going with that? I can't remember. But it was damn good point all the same. Yeah, if you have this fear of the blank page, and there's a proper word for that, which goes beyond fear of the blank page, but I can't remember what it's called. That stops you writing. Then you give yourself limitations. When I'm teaching younger kids, I will tell them, watch a TV show, something they don't know. Watch the first half, then turn it off, and write the second half, and then write. They don't have to write the whole script, but write the story of what happens in the second half, and then go back and write a different first half. Really try not to have anything that they had in their first half, and get the two of them to match up so that if someone new came along and read it, they wouldn't see the join. And then what you have is a completely new story. Now, it is derivative, but then it's based on other people's characters anyway, so it's going to be derivative. That's part of the game. You need to kind of sometimes trick your brain into allowing you to tell the story. I mean, every writer I know gets that where they sit down and they start working at the end of the day. They get up and they go, "I have done nothing. I've achieved nothing today." And then they talk to their partner, their spouse, or boss, or whoever, and they say, the partner says, "How's it go?" "Great, yeah, good day." "Hey, loads done." And in reality, what you've done is looked at some guy in Ukraine repairing tractor wheels for 4 hours on YouTube. We've all. You have to allow yourself time not to write as well. But at the same time, it won't get done if you don't do it. If you don't put the time in yourself. If you don't apply seat of the pants to the seat of the chair. If you don't put your fingers on the keyboard, or your lovingly crafted fountain pen and your special vellum paper and your moleskin nonsense, sitting in your cafe sipping your mocha loca al Pacino. If you don't actually write the vector thing, no one can read it. Does that sound like it makes any kind of sense? Are we going to write our stories, or are we just going to talk about writing them? Are we going to get stuck, or are we going to fight our way to the end? Are we going to jump that chasm somehow? You're only limited to your own imagination, and your imagination will take you all the way from one end of the story to the other. And there will be gaps that you don't know you're going to encounter. But it's all made up anyway. You can make up a solution as long as the solution makes sense then to the reader, because ultimately the story is not for you. The story is for the reader. Long after I'm dead, in 1,000 years' time, people theoretically will still be able to read my stuff. And it'll be in classrooms, they'll be going, "What did the writer mean by this?" And the kids will be going, "Oh, I don't know," tap on their phones. Theoretically, this story outlives us. It is something we create beyond ourselves. So some weaker-willed people will have children to fulfill that means. But those of us who are writers know the correct way to do it is to make up stories about the Mars quotient. Every story has to have monsters, aliens, robots, or superheroes. That's the rules. And if you're watching a movie like Pride and Prejudice and it doesn't have monsters, then the writer screwed up, and it's your job to write a better version. So if you do find yourself stuck for something to write, or stuck in the middle of writing, you just got to go, "Well, hang on. It's all in here anyway. It's just a matter of getting it out." And you can do that bit where you can pretend they've escaped from the jungle or escaped from the trap, and then work it out later, and then realize they didn't need to escape at all. You can go back and fill in the gaps later on, because the reader doesn't read it in the order which you write it. One of my great friends, Paul Tomlinson, is a British writer who's almost a genius. I won't say he actually is a genius, because, I'm smarter than him. No, but he will often just write the nice bits first. He writes the bits, he plans his story, very roughly, and he just writes the exciting parts first. I go, "No, you should write the crappy bits first. You eat the sprouts and the peas, and then you save the roast potatoes, to the end, because they're the best bit." But it works for him. Whatever works from you, whatever gets you from A to Z, you don't have to go in the right order. And there's no reason the alphabet is in that order anyway, because on the keyboard, it goes from Q to M, not counting on the foreign keyboard and the punctuation. You don't have to create your story in the order in which they be read. And that's very true for comics. But at the same time, you've got to be aware with comics, the audience is not the person you're writing for. You're writing for the other creators. Penciler, inker, letterer, colorist, and the editor. That's about an hour.
I missed that key stag.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody else can come in now. Yeah.
Just before we call it the end, any question?
Yeah, well, the story you gave about the artist not missing the dark patches. Isn't that down to the editor's choice to pick a correct art?
Yeah, absolutely. But it could be argued, I think it could be argued, that I should have made it clearer to the editor I need a dark look to this story. It has to feel like a horror story and not like a whimsical thing. So the fault could come back to me there. I mean, I'm not saying it necessarily does. But yeah, the editor does an awful lot of the work in terms of, but by choosing the correct colorist and artist. With Dreadnoughts, which is a story I have, the early days of the judge system makes it one done by John Higgins and colored by Sally Hurst. Sally has a very muted palette the whole time to give this the correct sort of atmosphere to the story. And if anybody else had coloured this, it would not be anywhere near as good. I knew John was going to be the artist because just after I finished the script of the first book, I was talking to him, and I mentioned what I was doing. He goes, "Oh, I want to draw that." And I was thinking, "There's no way they're going to give me you," because he's the best in the business. And so the artist and the colorist and the letterer make a huge, huge difference. What's important to also bear in mind, and every creator should bear in mind, someone coming along, first thing they do is they go, cover artist, hugely important. We have no control over that, almost none. And in this particular case, because it's a single graphic novel, John Higgins got to do the cover. Person flipping through, the first thing they'll notice is the colour. Then they'll notice the art. And then they notice the lettering and the story, but only when they start to actually read it. Their first impression will be the colour. That is hugely important in terms of getting in completely new readers. Someone flipping through it in the shop, or flipping through it in an online. I'm sure that's what the young people are saying these days. The colour is the first thing they'd say because before their eyes fully focus. An awful lot of American comic fans cannot cope with the British comics of the 60s and 70s and 80s that were my love, 2008 and all that, which were mostly in black and white. And they're looking at me, no, it feels cold to them, feels stark. There's no warmth. The warmth, you bring it with you. It's in your heart. We don't need to be hand-fed this warmth by these rampant, mad, manic colorists. But their discipline is very, very different to ours. People who grew up in reading comics in Japan in the 80s are the exact same thing. They look at American comics and they go, "Oh, the colours are not right. It's too gaudy. It's too garish." Because an awful lot of the best comics then, in the 70s, say, would have been line art, black and white. So our job, as I said, as a comic writer, it's hugely important because we are backbone. We are the skeleton of this creative process, but we're not the whole animal. The art, it would be the meat, and the colour would be the skin, and the lettering is the molds and the hair. It's a really bad analogy, but it makes dinosaurs, and that's the important thing. So, without the skeleton, the thing cannot move. It just flops out. I mean, okay, yes, there's jellyfish. Bloody jellyfish lobby always coming in and kicking my analogies in the nuts. But the skeleton is what keeps everything upright. If the story isn't solid and doesn't all fit together neatly, it can't work. You can't also can't work without the art. And it really can't work without the skin either, because all the bits just keep like falling out onto the floor. So it's, we're part of a team. The writers were the most important part of the team, and we're definitely the better looking part of the team. And the artists here. Oh no. But we have to understand that it's not, the story exists ultimately for the readers, but before that it has to be channeled to the visual side of it. When you see a superstar writer, there was recently a new version of the Killing Joke, Batman the Killing Joke by Brian Bolland and Alan Moore and John Higgins. There's a whole big article in one of the papers looking back at it 30 years or however many years you've been. But what a seminal work it is. It's hugely important work. And it does not mention the artist once. Brian Bolland is one of the greatest comic artists who ever lived or ever will live. He is fantastic. Second only to me. No, come. But it was a great example of the story having greater resonance than the art. As the reviewer or interviewer who once saw this, we talked only about Alan Moore and how important the story was. And in fact, Alan Moore no longer really recognised the story as being something that he's proud of. When the comic came out, it changed everything. I mean, now it's basically one of the ones that lit the whole Batman empire back on fire again, in a good way. So we are part of a team, and one member of the team becomes elevated so highly that the others are kind of fallen away. That diminishes all of us. It can lift us all, but at the same time, it generally doesn't. People will go on about Alan Moore as being the greatest comic writer ever, and he is. They forget that the stories would be nothing without Dave Gibbons or John Higgins or Brian Bolland or whatever, Steve Parkhouse, all the people who actually brought his words to life. So we don't sit there and read an Alan Moore script. We read a comic written by him and drawn by someone else and lettered by someone else and coloured so on. So yeah, it's a teamwork. Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? Anything else? I could talk for days.
Very much like cinematography, where your script power and then the cinematographer is.
Yes. Yeah, of course. I mean, if the script didn't exist to begin with, it's very hard to get any kind of movie out of it. You can just film random stuff and snap it together, and some people do, and sometimes it's Robert Altman. But otherwise, it's very hard to get that.
Do you write side notes to the artist to give them a hint of what?
Well, yeah, the panel, every page has. Actually, there's one in here. That actually, I think it's to fill out the pages of this. We put in one of the scripts, I think. Oh no, we didn't in this one.
Oh, it's like a theatre script where you'd have door squeaks on the left hand side.
Yeah, because there's a lot of that. I thought we had a script in this one, but we obviously don't. There is a lot of that. You basically say, what I do is say, script name, number of pages, page 1, 6 panels, panel 1, interior, the Hall of Justice, Mega City 1, this kind of thing. Describe what's happening, then the dialogue, panel 2, and so on. So it is very like a movie script. There's no standard set way to do it in comics. Movie scripts are very rigid in the way you lay it out, and there's all sorts of clever macros you can get for your computer to do it, and certain software that's only writes in that way. Well, comics, it's much more fluid. Everybody's got their own way of doing it. But ultimately, your job is you can have a note to the artist saying, this has to be on the left because, or you can say to the colorist, I want this bit to be, this panel to be in black and white because it's a flashback. And then they will ignore that every second time. But sometimes what happens is you send the script to the editor, and the editor will tweak it and send it to the artist, and then you get the thing back and you go, this don't play with. That's annoying. But yeah, it is, you can be as friendly as you want to the artist. So when I started out, I used to write little jokes and little humorous asides to entertain the artist until I realised that I was just wasting their time because they're reading through this stuff. And also, when I was chatting to, again, the great John Higgins, I'm actually out in his studio where he with his drawing board, and he gets a script, and he pins the current page he's working up on the wall in front of him, and then he looks at that and he does his thumbnail sketch. And I realized, wait, sometimes my descriptions for a page of comic art are more than a page of text, more than, an A4 sheet. I would go on waffling too much. So I would have a 6-page thing, but it takes a page and a half to describe that. That means he's got to pin 2 pages up on his wall. I went, that's a bit awkward. So what I've started doing since then, and it's been a good more than a decade now, I have a rule that I will not write more than a page of script for every page of comic. So if I have a 48-page story, I will write that in 48 pages exactly. What about when I need to have more descriptions to go in? Well, then I'm writing it wrong. It forces me to be concise. Brevity is there. I love that joke. That's one of the Simon Ministers. Keep it simple. Your job is not to show off to the artist how clever you can be. Your job is to tell them what is to put on the page. And sometimes you can cheat by saying, see reference pic attached. Leave a bunch of pics at the end to go, draw that in there, but make it science fiction-y and make it look better. So we do that a lot. You need to be as clear as possible. And if it does take a page and a half to describe one panel, like Alan Moore does sometimes, where you describe the motes of dust and the patterns and all that sort of stuff, and he does it all in capital, so he's shouting at you. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But you should be able to be, concise. Keep it simple. You have a question.
I was just wondering if you were trying to get it's your first time writing a concept and you want to do it in a one-shot sense, you want it to be almost like a pitch. How do you go about writing that? It's your first time doing.
Oh, well, if I was approaching the editor, if I had a specific editor in mind, I'd ask them what they're looking for. So that way, if it's a war, do you want a war story? Do you want a detective story? Whatever. But you're in your pitch. What I would do is I would work out the story in my head, write down a couple of paragraphs, a page at most to describe the story, and then write the whole thing down in about two sentences. So basically concise down exactly the elevator pitch. And that's the idea, is that if you get trapped in an elevator, where you're in an elevator with an editor or producer or whatever, and they say to, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on, you describe it very succinctly.
Between 3, 4.
Exactly. You've got to have that. The best example always is, going back to Harry Potter, is that what if there was a school for wizards? Or a school for magical, whichever way you want to look at it. And that describes the entire 7 Harry Potter books in a nutshell. The writer we describe in a nutcase. It's so obviously that's not the story, but that's what it's about. So your elevator pitch, your little pitch it's about a man who comes from another planet and is raised as a human, but turns out he's actually a superhuman being. And we're talking about, obviously, me. That's Superman, but it doesn't describe Superman, but it gives you an about. So that's an art form to get that pitch down. So it's practice. Another great practice thing you can do, and I know we're going way off topic here, is Harry Harrison, the great science fiction writer, who was a good friend of many of us here, because he used to live in Ireland. Harry used to practice writing narrative hooks when he was starting out as a writer. He was an artist originally, and then one day he was very, very sick, couldn't draw, but he could type. So he wrote a short story, sent it to an editor who said, yes, send me an invoice. And he went, hey, I'm a writer. Because that's how easy it is. That was 1957, but there you go. So Harry writes practice writing narrative hooks, and I used to do this. And the narrative hook is the opening of a story that will make the readers go, ooh, and turn the page. Yeah, what happens next? I wrote one years ago where it's told from the first person point of view, and he's saying there's a knife in me. It's embedded in my chest right to the hilt, and I can't pull it out because they've cut off my arms. And I got 2 totally different stories out of that. Literally, neither were published, but because they were both rubbish. But it intrigued me so much to go, oh, what happens there? So it's a great way to practice when you cannot think of, if you get stuck in a story or you get stuck before a story, you want to wait. It's a great way of doing it. But you need to do like 150 of them to get good at it. You're ultimately, when it comes to your story, it is about, as I said before, it's about the readers, their experience. So what you've got to do is write something that will have narrative hooks effectively all the way through that makes them keep going, want to know what happens next. So you start off, there's a mystery of some kind, there's something going on, they don't know, nobody knows what it is. The reader needs to be engaged enough to go, I will turn the page, all the way through. And until you get to the end, and then you need them going, what? You don't need them going, yeah. And the other thing I always tell the kids as well, that when you have a twist in the story, it's really important that the reader goes, should have seen that coming, and not, where did that come from? So you see your story with all the clues that it will be revealed at the end. So we done. No.
The pitch. You actually put the ending in? Because...
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. With your pitch, if you're pitching to an editor, you'd have like your the way I would do it is the page would be at the top of the page. I'd have my contact details, title of the thing, the elevator pitch, which is just a couple of lines. Usually it's about so and so. It just say something like in brief colon what the story is about, and then a more detailed synopsis. But that should be the whole story. Some people will write their synopsis like it's the back of the book blurb. Will you be the back of the paperback where does this one have a blurb on it? Oh, this one has a blurb. There's the Judges series that I wrote, prose novels based on Judge Dredd. This one says, United States of America, 2033 AD, in a time of widespread poverty, inequality, and political unrest, Eustace Fargo's controversial new justice laws come into effect. Protests and violence meet the first judges as they hit the street to enforce the law. The cure, it's clear, is worse than the disease. Is this a sign of things to come? Now, people will write their pitches to the editor in that sort of style. But your synopsis, your story, and you have to tell them what's going to happen. They have to know that you can tell a story. This is a question. You need to give them an answer. So when I was pitching the first book in this series, I wrote one of the 3 novels in this, and I created the whole series, and I edited the whole shebang. But when I was pitching that, I gave them I basically pitched it. The elevator pitch is pretty much this. Is this the sort of things to come? But the actual story I told in clear detail. It's about this series of judges. This is what happens to them, and this is how it throws wrapped up at the end. Because if you can't show the editor that you know how the story ends, they will start to think that you're making it up as you go along. Now, a lot of the time we are making it up as we go along, but we don't want to let them know. But no, if you know how the story ends, it's easier to know when you're finished. This is how we became it, isn't it? So with this case, with that story, I don't want to spoil the ending. The killer, because there's a mysterious killer. The killer turns out to be, I can't spoil it. It's too good. But the killer is someone that we knew all along was connected to the story. But remember saying about planting your seeds? When you get to the end of that book, you go, oh yeah, of course she's the killer. Oh, I said she. Well, of course that person who might not be a woman is the killer. And you look like, oh yeah, because she said that, and then this thing happened. Oh yeah, it couldn't have been anybody else. But the reader cannot get to the end and go, well, do it. They have to go, oh, yeah, of course she is. So that's the great thing about writing. And you can do what Agatha Christie used to do, which was come up with the ending first and figure out the best place to start. And very often that's what we do with a story. So, but and it goes into different kind of mechanics of storytelling. That's not necessarily only for comics. But with comics, sometimes what you'll do is you'll have a visual idea in your head of what you want to happen. See, the final conflict, and then work backwards from there. So it's quite similar, but not always. But yeah, so your pitch, yeah. If you have to show the editor that you know what your story is going to be about. That's very important. You can't say, yeah, it's about a superhero. Yes, but what happens to them So the elevator pitch is it's about a superhero who something that makes them unique. They're a reverse bus conductor. I know what that is. But then the actual in detail says this is who they are, this is what happens to them, and this is how it wraps up. And then usually your story will actually go along those lines, but not necessarily. But yeah, and it is important to know what you're doing. And if you're an artist who decides, you know what, I'm going to write my own scripts, there's a special circle in hell for people who do that, because it doesn't go the other way around. It doesn't go the other way around that, you know, I'm a writer, I think I'll draw my own comics. Because you imagine what god-awful comics we would draw. But then the problem with that is, some of the artists who decide, that's just typing, writing isn't that hard. When you read their scripts, it's the equivalent of someone with, you know, when you see a really bad sketch, their stories read a bit like that. So sometimes, you know, it isn't a good thing. But well, the most important thing about writing is to practice. You can't get worse by practicing. You can only get better. So, you know, even if you don't want to write, that's when you must. Because you will write some of your best stuff when you're not feeling it. Not always, but sometimes you come back and go, that's really good. And that's the little boost that you need. That when you come back the next day and you write your next bit. What else is the important thing? Oh yeah. If you're going to write every day, then what you do is you write every day. And you don't do the, well, I'll do twice as much tomorrow. No, because you won't. Talking ain't doing. You know? So you can't talk about being a great musician if you don't ever pick up the guitar. You know? You can't talk about being a great pianist if you don't ever pick up piano. You could be a superhero and pick up a piano, because that would be awesome. But you have to do the work. This is where we came in. This is really good, isn't it? Wraps it very neatly. It really works if you don't point it out, though. Yeah, if you don't write the story, it doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, no one can draw it. No one can read it. And, you know, talking ain't doing. You know, go home today, and instead of watching telly, instead of doing trivial stuff like feeding the children or making the dinner or feeding the bed or whatever it is, hoovering the lawn, instead of doing that, write a story. Write a short story. Give yourself limitations, because it's hard. You learn when things are hard. Writing drabble. You know what a drabble is? Drabble is a story that is 100 words exactly. You can have an extra up to 15 words for the title. You're not allowed to cheat and use the title words as part of your story. That's not 100 words. If you go online, look up drabbles, read some of the good ones. Well, you know, some of them, most of them are crap. That's not the point. But by forcing yourself to learn how to do this, you will grow as a writer. And writing short stuff helps you write long things, and vice versa. But writing short stuff is the key for comics. Writing short. Brevity is... No, I made it even braver now. Okay, I think we're done. Are we done? Anybody got any more questions? Go on. I'll go for it. Yeah.
You worked superheroes, right? And then some of them were anthology and some of them weren't.
Yes.
Did you get to decide that? Or did that happen?
Which superheroes? You mean the novels? Or these ones? You see this? Yeah. I know, like, this is all my homework. So yeah, this is a short story collection from a Christmas. I have loads of them. No, that was entirely my work. I created a superhero series of novels, because at that time nobody was writing superheroes in prose, and then by the time my book came out, there was loads of them on the way. So I was first, but that ends up being 9 novels in that series, and 3 different publishers, because it kept failing, but I kept writing. So yeah, see, I won in the end. But yeah, so you know, the short stories, I created this book and self-published that one, because I had other stories that wouldn't fit into the main thread, and I went, oh well, just do a collection, and it worked. It took 7 years to sell enough copies to get my money back for that one. So,
like, you'd actually decided yourself.
Yeah,
They didn't say, you don't want an anthology in this.
no, they didn't. Because when I signed the contracts, I made it very clear that I own the characters. When you write a novel, you generally will own all the characters. I wasn't basically going to hire anybody else to work, so I could do whatever I want. And arguably, I mean, if I wanted to make a movie or a comic based on these situations and characters, I can do that. Yeah, there was a different time though when that happened. That was like 2006. I signed the contract or something like that, 2005. So 20 years ago nearly. So yeah, but yeah, so yeah, if you're writing for something like Judge Dredd, they, you do what they tell you pretty much. I can't, example, suddenly decide to write a new Judges or Judge Dredd story because the publishers will go, no, we own that. You don't get the right to do that. And but then again, I mean, they are very flexible anyway. So they allow us to create these awesome books. Look how good that is! What lovely.
Get this code book playing in the universe without actually bringing in playing characters. You will tell us, no, nice.
Well, that's kind of what Judges is. Judges is basically the early days of the Judges. So, so Judge Dredd isn't even born yet or hatched yet.
Wait, range.
Cool. And same with Dreadnoughts. Dreadnoughts is basically the comic version of these stories. There's even crossover characters. So yeah, I've like complete reign there. But what happened was because I'm already familiar with Judge Dredd and I know the whole thing very, very well. I've been reading 2000 AD since very first issue in 1977. So I was able to pitch the idea to the editor. I said, "This is what I want to write. I know the exact time frame. I know what happens." Yeah. Oh yeah, they own absolutely everything, and they went, "Yes, you can do this." And I said there would be limitations. We're not doing that and that and that. And they said that's fine. But with these Judges and with Dreadnoughts, I am the showrunner effectively. So it's all my own work. Which it's quite good. It gives you a sense of power. Especially when the other writers come along with their takes and you go, no. And with Judges, we have 9 books so far. The first one is set in the 2030s. First trilogy set in the 2030s. Second trilogy is set in the 2040s, then the 2050s. And the plan was, we might not get there, to do another trilogy in the 2060s, which is the Atomic Wars in the States. And then the 27s, which is the rise of Mega City 1 and the Judges. But that leads into Judge Dredd Year 1, which has been out for decades. So it'll all be, seamless. We might never get there. The first few of these sold like hot gangbusters. But subsequently, it's kind of say pretty bad. So, yeah, it don't always work. Not everything will succeed.
If you're running into continuity errors, what's the shit?
Well, Judge Dredd has an established continuity that's theoretically immutable. It hasn't been reset, but in reality, it has been reset a little bit. Originally, 2000 came out in 1977, and the first Judge Dredd story was set in 2099. So that's 122 years ahead. But this book is set in 2033, and it was published in 2018. That's only 15 years ahead. So like that's 122 years ahead. So this book has characters using cell phones. The original Judge Dredd stories don't have cell phones because they hadn't been invented, so the writers didn't think of using them in the stories. And yeah, there's a lot of things like that. But there are some minor continuity problems, very minor.
Ones I've noticed is that in the very first few Judge Dredd stories, there is actually police.
Yeah, there's a few police officers. Even for the first couple of years, they'll show up occasionally. So if I ever do get to write the later books, I will make it clear that will be some police still hanging around.
The other big continuity thing is this story called Really the Pink.
Yeah.
Where it's it's an ex to Judge
Gibson.
Well, at the end, Judge Dredd is after his year big show for the judges who fifth that year, and there's only 4 of them.
Yeah. In the very, very early Judge Dredd stories, the idea was that the judges would be like extra police. Yeah. Police plus. And there were still cops around, and they phased that idea out. Yeah, but that's a real idea. I don't know. That's more likely what will happen in the real world. Yeah. Judges are terrifying in the real world, by the way. Judge, jury, and executioner. They decide you're guilty. You're guilty. That's it. No appeals, no parole, no questions. You're done. It's really good fun writing bastards.
My thanks again to Michael for joining us for this particular episode. As I was saying, Michael was one of the first guest speakers to participate in Creating Conversation, and he was also one of the very first industry pros to actually reach out and support with Task Art as well. So sincere thanks to Michael, and stay tuned for more episodes dropping each week. And if you liked what you heard in this episode and would like to participate in a future episode as part of an audience, please follow us online at TaskArt, or follow us at TASQART or TASQART.com. Until next time, this has been a copyright production of Carroll Consultancy 2025.